Hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to ELTAI, English Language Teachers Association of India's 76th webinar on understanding the experience of debilitated English learners with Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Our today's speaker will be Dr. John A. Joseph, moderated by Dr. Kalanithi and Ms. Stefy Esther. Before moving on to the program, may I request everyone to watch the promotional video of ELTAI. Welcome back. A quick couple of announcements. Please make use of the chat box and post your queries and questions. Your questions will be answered by the speaker during the Q&A session. Do not share your personal details like mail IDs and phone numbers in the chat box. And now I would like to introduce our two moderators, Dr. Kalanithi and Ms. Stefy Esther. Dr. LRS Kalanithi is the Associate Professor of English at Guru Nanak College, Chennai. Her PhD was on Communicative Language Teaching from Gandhigram Rural University. She has published 25 papers on English language teaching and literature in peer-reviewed journals. She has been a resource person in orientation programs, refresher courses, and teacher induction programs. Recently, she reviewed a 900-page A to Z word picture dictionary for the students of the government primary schools under Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan published by the government of Tamil Nadu. She is also the head of ELTAI's Chennai chapter. Welcome you, ma'am. And now, let me introduce our second moderator. Ms. Stefy Esther is the literature graduate from Ethiraj College for Women in Chennai. She has completed her MA and MPhil in English literature as well. She is also a CELTA certified trainer. She is currently a teacher fellow at Ethiraj and is a secretary of the Chennai Central chapter of ELTAI. Welcome you, ma'am. And now, let me hand over the floor to Dr. Kalanithi. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all. Today's webinar is on understanding the experience of debilitated English learners with Neuro-Linguistic Programming by the resource person, Dr. John A. Joseph. I am very much delighted to introduce our most distinguished resource person. A professional coach, counselor, and trainer, Dr. John A. Joseph has varied experiences in the fields of education, communication, neuro-linguistic programming, and business have tempered him to lead people from all walks of life to their excellence. Having started his career as a member of the teaching faculty at Loyola College, Chennai, and served as director of SRC under Ministry of Human Resources Development and vice president of two software companies, he has lived a vibrant life that has crisscrossed various business verticals, all the while drawing inspirations and insights and learning valuable points. He has also had his hand in a handful of business startups in wide-ranging verticals. With the belief that people have all the resources they need within themselves, he enjoys bringing them out, engendering people to blossom and attain their full potential. Dr. Joseph has trained leaders in the fields of business, education, social work, and people's forums in most of the major cities of India, in addition to training thousands of police personnel. He is an expert in applying neuro-linguistics programming in the education sector. Thousands of school teachers, college teachers, and students have benefited from his training programs. Revealing and giving meaning to lives of people who have lost interest in living and given up hope, he makes people successful and happy by getting them neurologically aligned with their purpose, identity, beliefs, values, capability, behavior, and environment. By anchoring people in their most resourceful states, he helps them attain their utmost competence. Taking people through various perceptual positions, he enlarges the perspectives of people so that they always look for and achieve win-win solutions. Redeeming people from their problem state and entrenching them in the solution state is one of the successful techniques he uses powerfully, achieving marvelous results. With his guidance, people get attuned to obtain their best possible outcomes. In short, he helps people to know who they are, what they want to become, and helps them to devise strategies to become what they want to become. Besides identifying the limiting beliefs in people and superimposing enabling beliefs that help them to succeed in life, he discovers the thinking patterns of people and helps them to develop ideal learning and presentation styles. Helping people to build rapport with others and training them to match, pace, and lead others to greater advantage have developed the leadership qualities of many of his trainees. Editing and publishing Education Monitor has been one of his contributions to the field of education. After discovering debilitated English learner syndrome, he has taken special interest in studying the revelations of neuroscience and developing his own concepts in the field of neuro-linguistic learning. Dr. Joseph believes that life is worth living and the predictable unpredictability is its charm. At this juncture, on behalf of our ELTAI Chennai chapter, I heartily thank the ELTAI stalwarts, Dr. Ramani, Dr. Mohan Raj, Dr. Ilango, and Dr. Mandir Karasi for having given me this opportunity. On all our behalf, May I now invite the resource person of the day, Dr. John A. Joseph, to take over the proceedings. Sir, please.
Thank you, madam. It was too much of an introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am elated to be in the company of so many erudite scholars who have the mandate, willingness, and capability to educate students of all sorts, irrespective of the varied degrees of success. Though it has been the joint venture of a great many people and the sacrifices of selected experts, I would record here my appreciation for Professor K. Ilango Kandam, who has ceaselessly devoted decades of his service in taking ELTAI to such a height, involving a great number of educationists, especially teachers of English. It has been my Achilles heel that when I address a group of intellectual educationists like you, I tend to overwhelm them with too many concepts with a view to achieving as much as possible within a short duration of time. On face-to-face situation in a program of longer duration, the participants have the opportunity to interrupt and clarify. In an online situation, I would surely control myself and stick to the goal of driving home the intended minimum agenda. I shall make it a full-fledged PowerPoint presentation. So that you have the luxury of seeing the main points in the written form while hearing me speak. Do you see my slide?
No, sir.
So I have clicked slides. What next?
Yeah. Now we could see you, sir. Yeah, we could see you.
Now you can see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption. Our topic today is understanding the experience of debilitated English learners with neuro-linguistic programming. I was asked to speak on some topic related to the role of NLP in teaching of English. Without any hesitation, I gave this topic, maybe because it has been in the back of my mind for quite some time. When I thought about it later, it dawned upon me that the first ever formal definition of NLP was the study of the structure of subjective experience. Our hero today is the debilitated English learner. When I thought about the subject later, the co-creators of NLP, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, discovered that our experience has a structure. Grinder had already done his doctorate in linguistics in Chomsky's transformational grammar. Though children pick up language in informal situations where language is not taught formally, they pick up grammatically correct language. It has a structure. That means we have the ability to have that structure inlaid, though we pick the information in tatters. If we change the order of words given in a correct sentence, we'll get a set of words that have no meaning at all. We create our experience with a structure of inputs called strategy. Even to feel sad, we have a strategy. So let's talk about our hero today. Our hero has learned English for 12 to 14 years, has learned English in the formal setup for 2,400 to 2,800 hours, finds it difficult to speak or write on his or her own, had learned to use contextually and meaningfully 10 words. Had she learned to use contextually and meaningfully 10 words and one sentence per month, he or she would have learned to use about 150 sentences, which is enough to manage small conversation. And our hero has been quoted to more than 3,000 English words. And has repeatedly learned aspects of English grammar and also knows by rote hundreds of correct English sentences. In spite of all that, our hero is a very sad person. Our hero is like the polar bear, once newly bought for the Denver Zoo. The Denver Zoo once was very interested in acquiring a polar bear. The director of the zoo, who had special affinity for bears, decided that the polar bears of the Denver Zoo should have the largest and most naturalistically built home in the zoo. So he set his designers, engineers, and construction crew to work to build an enclosure that was so big and naturalistic in its representation of the splendor of the Arctic terrain that it would rival in craftsmanship and expand the cages of even the largest and the most famous zoos of the world. The construction of the polar bear's enclosure was only about half completed. However, when the director was offered a good deal on one of the most beautiful polar bears he had ever laid eyes upon, since good deals on polar bears don't come along very often, the director decided to go ahead and purchase the bear, even though its enclosure was only partially completed. The bear was sedated, and when it awoke, it found itself in a small cage made of thick metal bars that had been placed directly in the middle of the giant naturalistic enclosure that was still under construction. It was to remain in the smaller cage until the larger structure was finished. The small enclosure was just large enough that the polar bear could take about 4 good-sized steps before being halted by the cold metal bars. Having nothing else in particular to do while inhabiting the small cage, the bear soon developed a habit of pacing its tiny environment. It would take 4 steps in one direction, rear up on its hind legs as it made a 180-degree turn slowly, and take 4 steps in the opposite direction before rearing up by slowly thrusting its front paws high into the air as it made its turn. All day long, the bear would slowly pace back and forth in its cage, carefully observing the work crew as they labored away and the huge enclosure that surrounded it. Finally, after months of painstaking craftsmanship and steady labor, the zoo's construction crew completed the polar bear's new home. The bear was again still sedated, and the small cage of metal bars that had been the bear's world for so many months was removed. A large crowd of zoo visitors also, along with the entire zoo staff and construction crew, and of course the proud director, gathered around the enclosure and anxiously waited to see how the bear would take to its beautiful new environment. The polar bear awoke, cautiously got to its feet, and shook the remains of the drug-induced sleep from its head. The director could almost feel the excitement that must have surely been building in bear's own breast as it made ready to explore its beautiful, lifelike environment. He eagerly watched as the bear took 4 slow but steady steps before rearing up, paused high in the air, and turned around to take 4 steps in the opposite direction, rearing again as it turned and retraced the first steps and reared. The bear, that had by this time a vast area for its home, had got so much used to the tiny cage and got conditioned to its movements to the available space that it was addicted to the smaller 4 steps it could take forward to rear up again to retrace the steps. While comparing our hero, the debilitated English learner, with a polar bear terribly conditioned to its tiny cage, I am sure you would clearly understand his experience of being conditioned by the methods of learning English ceaselessly for years. You might also have heard the term baby elephant syndrome. Elephants accept false limitations as they believe in invisible chains. This belief of bondage is inflicted on them when these huge elephants were babies, barely able to walk on their own. When the fully grown elephant senses the chain or rope around its leg, it believes it is still that same baby elephant. It doesn't know that it can break free. This story shows how in life the stories people have imposed on us can bind us in invisible chains. We have all had experiences in our lives that have put a clasp on how we define ourselves. When someone else tells you that you can't do something and you believe them, they write your story for you. Believing someone else's story about you influences the actions that you take and where you see your goals in the future. What we have to do is learn about ourselves and become more self-aware, more self-observant to identify these invisible chains so we can break free and live our best life. Our debilitated English learners go through the same experience. They have had no problem in learning their mother tongue, proving to themselves to others that they are capable of learning a language. However, English teachers, through their subjective and dogmatic ways of teaching English, have put the shackles of limitations in the thought process of the learners, and with much difficulty and years of concerted, protracted, and labored methods of teaching, have ingrained in their mind the simulated belief that they have a hitch in learning English. Now let's move on to debilitated English learner syndrome. We can call it Delts. Delts occurs when a child falls short of perfecting the conscious and unconscious processes involved in handling English language learning during the early days of learning the language and the standardization of those processes required to master the language thereafter. Delts happens when a student's map of learning English is dominated by negative beliefs. The negative beliefs are caused by the negative experiences of learning English. Negative experiences are caused by repeated failures in learning English in spite of a series of attempts. The repeated failures are caused by lack of skills in learning English. The failure to develop skills is because of the improper learning strategies. It is because of the bad strategy used appropriate representations in the inappropriate sequence to achieve your goal. The sequence is supposed to be the interconnections between motivation, perception, imagery, emotion, and memory that facilitate the learner to mentally build connections between verbal and pictorial information patterns, or between new and prior knowledge, and integrate them with relevant knowledge structures in long-term memory. The learner has failed mentally to connect or construct knowledge structures. It's the failure of the processes by which a learner deals with information. Now let's move on to the symptoms of debilitated English learner. And now we know this is our homegrown. Each of us would have experienced these things with our students we have been handling. The students with the Delts find it difficult to learn to speak and write English correctly beyond a point, however hard they might try. Though the same language rules are taught repeatedly, the students suffering from Delts are not able to get the mastery of applying grammar to form correct sentences in writing as well as in speaking. They do not have a sense of word order in constructing English sentences. They fail miserably in constructing correct English sentences, putting the words in proper alignment and agreement with each other. They find it difficult to bring out from their memory the appropriate words to express their ideas when required. They lack study skills, and most of the time they tend to learn by rote. They are not capable of analyzing what is wrong with their methodology in order to improve their learning. Since most of them do their higher studies with English as the medium of instruction, in order to understand the concepts, they have to translate every sentence into their mother tongue, which turns out to be a short-lived, laborious process. Some of them are obsessed with a sense of shame, even by the thought of committing mistakes in their attempt to speak or write English. Incidentally, they lose their confidence and hope of speaking or writing flawless English ever in the future. As a result, they also lose their interest in learning English. They suffer from inferiority complex that prevents them from bringing out the best in them. Though they recognize the English words they know, they find it difficult to connect them with their meanings spontaneously. They do not know the correct pronunciation of a great number of English words, and even when the teacher speaks, they are not able to identify the words spoken by the teacher. They are not able to group words meaningfully, and hence when they read a sentence, they read it in such a broken way that they do not make any meaning for themselves nor to their listeners. When the teacher speaks in normal speed, they do not make head or tail out of it. This puts them off from even making any attempt to listen to the teacher and learn. Very often they come to the despairing conclusion that they cannot learn English. They feel insulted when the teacher tells them that they are studying in a college and they cannot expect to be taught as in a school. They feel neglected when the teacher interacts only with the students who answer their questions in the class. After serious attempts to understand what they learn, they invariably fall back upon the kind of learning they know, and that is learning by rote in order to take examinations. They need to study for more number of hours, sacrificing their sleep. This makes them tired and exhausted, making studying more and long drawn out and painful for them. It is normal for them to study all the subjects without understanding. Studying turns out to be a miserable struggle, and they hate studying. All these experiences reduce them to persons of low self-image and low confidence and lacking hope and vision. Many of them fail to master the English language in their lifetime, though they have acquired the requisite vocabulary and learned English grammar repeatedly. Students suffering from Delts normally lack the courage to aspire for great things in life that they are capable of. Now let's just for a moment think about what a human is, a man or a woman. When you look at a human being, we look at a collection of experiences that are programmed into an algorithm. Each individual is different. For that matter, even each animal is different. According to the experiences it has had, each animal programs itself, and it's almost a kind of algorithm that guides them in life. When you look at the mind, it can do only 6 things. Since I have done a little bit of philosophy, I thought I had a wonderful intellect, and so for every human being. And because of our intelligence, we are so great. But after going through NLP, I found that our minds can do only 6 things. Our mind can see, hear, feel, taste, smell, and express all these experiences in language. Please think for a while whether anyone of your mind can do anything better than this. Now we are coming to the NLP communication model, which says everything. If you see in that right-hand corner below, we look at the sensory input, and that is going through a kind of internal processing, which is guiding our behavior. To come to the left to start with, we get the inputs of the world, as every one of you knows also. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. So these are the things, our 5 senses through which we get the world. And it is undergoing a process. The number 1 is deletion. We do not see everything we see. They say there are millions of information trying to get our attention every moment, and we are not capable, our senses are not capable of receiving each one of them. So we delete most of them, and perhaps we see, hear, or feel what we want to see, hear, or feel. Then distortion comes. Whatever we receive, we don't receive them as they are. We receive them as much as we can, the way we can receive them. Then generalization. When we receive some information, immediately we connect it to what we have already experienced, and we generalize it. So through these 3 processes, almost we do a lot of damage to whatever we receive through our senses. So objectivity is lost immensely. And beyond that, we have got filters, and one of them is language. We can express our ideas as much as the language we have mastered. Without language, without expressions, we cannot give a kind of definite shape to whatever we have experienced. So first of all, language limits our experience. Then our memory, that's another filter. We remember many things that we have already received. And because of this memory, we are also limiting the experiences we have, tagging them to the kind of memory we have already had. And decisions. Each one of us have made many decisions in life. And when we got to take a decision, we immediately typecast them again. This is similar to this, similar to that. And there are certain things called meta programs. We have been programmed in different ways. Each one of these are subjects for a day's explanation. Meta programs, for example, some people are big chunked, some are small chunked. For some people, we have to tell them very clearly. For some people, we have to tell them only what it is in the big chunk. If you explain to them in detail, they wouldn't accept it. For example, some are visual, some are kinesthetic, some are auditory. For example, if you want to go to the higher ups and to get a permission for something, if the person is visual, you have to put everything on paper with diagrams, and if you show them, he will accept it. But if that person is an auditory person, if you give a file, well done, he'll just close the file and ask you, please tell me what you want. And if the person is a kind of kinesthetic person, you have to put it across in such a way that the person feels what he has got to do. According to the feeling, he takes the decision and you are successful. Likewise, there are many meta programs. Another example would be some people want to get things done. Some people want to avoid certain things. So, for example, if a poor person wants to become rich, if you want to tell him you will have a palace, you will have all kinds of vehicles, he may not understand it. If you tell them you will not have hunger, you can avoid this misery, then he understands. So likewise, there are already meta programs which have been inlaid in us. We have been programmed accordingly. So according to that, we filter them. More than that, we have got values and beliefs. These are our life scripts. If somebody has got a kind of enhancing belief, then the person will accept it. If somebody has a limiting belief, whatever you do, unless you change the belief, nothing would happen. Next is attitudes. I did not explain what attitudes do. Next one is internal state. We are talking about states, resourceful state, most resourceful state. We would have experienced certain times we do everything the best possible way without any difficulty at all. That means you are in a most resourceful state. That means your mind, all that you have been thinking, they are in the right direction. Maybe in the right way, you get everything. Next is physiology. It also depends upon the bodily conditions. If you are sick, nothing can happen. Even bodily posture matters. So when it crosses all this, first it becomes a behavior. So our behavior depends upon all these things, processes that is happening in our mind. Our model of the world is the internal representations. Even the model of the world is represented within us as pictures, sounds, feelings, smells, tastes, and internal dialogues, self-talks. So this is what happens. Now imagine an debilitated English learner. Whatever we give as input, whatever he reads as input, whatever information or advice he gets, they go through all these processes. They are filtered, they are deleted, distorted, generalized, and it is according to his state, mental state, and the bodily condition. And finally, it turns into a kind of behavior that has failed. Now, for these experiences, we have got something called strategies. So what are these strategies? Syntax of sensory experiences. This is a concept, if you can understand, that would be a wonderful thing. We have already told you, mind can do only 6 things, and strategy comprises of the syntax of these things, sensory experiences. Strategy is a series and sequence of internal and external representations, which consistently produces the same specific result. So if the syntax is the same, the result is the same. As our sentences, the words are put in the same syntax, they give the same meaning. Similarly, even our experiences, when our feelings, our visuals, all these senses are put in a particular form, in a syntax, it gives the same experience. Strategies can also be set to like the program we used to run our neuro-linguistic computer, and the results we get are like the output of those programs. So now if you look at the debilitated English learner, he will have a strategy of thinking. And as he thinks visuals, sounds, or feelings, then he gets a result where he's not able to learn English. Now, how we represent them? We have got A for auditory, V for visual, K for kinesthetic, and O for olfactory. This was in the beginning, they were taking all these four. Olfactory takes in gustatory also. But now we deal with only auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, because under kinesthetic, we put olfactory and gustatory also. A strategy then is a series of overlapping quadruples in which at each step, each quadruple is acted upon by the representational operator through accessing cues and synesthesia patterns, giving one representational system more behavioral significance than the others. The results of this process determine which quadruple will be triggered or anchored next, the sequence of quadruplets, and ultimately what behavioral outcome will result. We can show this in the following way. Now, if you see in the middle, we got kinesthetic, then we got, it is followed by visual, then comes auditory, again a visual, again auditory, again kinesthetic. So that's a dominant. We may have all the senses at the same time, but one would be dominant, and that would matter. Now I put it clearly for you so that you can see it. These are shorter notations of the syntax of the elements in a person's strategy that have been developed are V for visual, A for auditory, K for kinesthetic, O for olfactory, G for gustatory. They got extensions also. If you put V and C is for constructed, that is, it's something new, something created, it's not already there. R stands for remembered, E for external. There may be auditory sounds coming, some may be external, some may be internal, some may be tonal, some may be digital. Is another explanation. When you combine all these things, when you say auditory external, we write it like that. Auditory remembered, auditory internal is written that way with a superscript, auditory constructed, AC, auditory constructed tonal, AC, T as subscript. Then auditory internal dialogue, AID. Similarly, visual external, visual internal, visual remembered, visual constructed. Then tactile feelings, kinesthetic internal, kinesthetic remembered, kinesthetic constructed. I know it's a little quick, and you'll understand it now better. NLP is known very much for its spelling strategy because it's for the lay people, it is very easy to understand. So we always use spelling strategy because it is used for English teachers also, and English teachers will understand it much better. A useful and productive spelling strategy goes along the following lines. First, a good speller hears a word that is auditory external. So when the person hears the word, then he or she makes a picture of the word, visual construct. Visual construct, that is. And looking at it, he or she feels good or right about its spelling. So that's a feeling, a gut feeling we say, when you hear, we feel, okay, it's correct. To rehearse the spelling, he or she retrieves a picture of the word once again. Visual. This is how the spell bees are taught in the Western countries. They are taught to visualize a word. If you are going to get the sound of the word and spell it, we will be most of the time mistaken, because in English, as Shaw said, we write something and say something else. So as a good speller, you have to see the spelling, then you have to take the feeling, gut feeling, whether it is right or wrong. If you've done it before, you have the memory within, and that memory will be traced, and it would say, okay, it's correct. If it is not, then you will have to refer to it. So this is a simple spelling strategy. So similarly, there are good spellers usually look up or straight ahead as they internally see the word and have a good feeling of rightness about it. Normally, we could see the eye movements. It may not be exact for everyone, but if you're watching very carefully, you will be able to identify how the eye moves. Seeing the word, he can now spell out the word verbally. That is auditory, digital, internal. He or she makes a picture of the word, visual constructed. Then with a feeling of familiarity for spelling it correctly, that is kinesthetic internal. He spells it externally. That is auditory, digital, external. The spelling strategy for champions goes auditory external, visual constructed, kinesthetic internal, auditory, digital, external. Hope you get some sense of what it is. I'll give you some more examples. Positive feelings as a component of strategy. So for strategy, how a positive feeling? Strategy, we said, it's a syntax of sensory experiences. So when you're giving a positive feeling, how it works, experts have analyzed the common components of the learning strategies of good learners. First of all, a good learner has positive feelings about learning, like excitement, eagerness, and willingness. That is kinesthetic. So without this, learning may not happen. Visualizing oneself learning and being successful. So the person is visualizing as if he's learning, he is capable of learning, and he's successful in learning. Or inner dialogue like, isn't this exciting? I can learn this. I want to know this. That is auditory dialogue, internal dialogue. All the time, there is some kind of internal dialogue going on within us. This can result in the needed motivation, which is an important component of your good learning strategy, which is written, kinesthetic internal, visual constructed, and auditory internal dialogue. So if somebody wants to start learning well, if this positive feeling is imposed there first, this can come. Then chunking down as a component of strategy. A good learner will avoid being overloaded or overwhelmed by learning through the strategy of chunking down the task. This depends on how the learner talks to himself and makes a decision on the effective strategy to be followed. This can be done by analyzing, namely by asking oneself, how can I divide this up into pieces I can manage? That is auditory internal dialogue. Or visualizing a series of pictures of smaller pieces. Good learners, besides understand and accept the confusion that sometimes prevails during the process of learning something. While poor learners are bogged down by difficulties in learning, good learners feel excited, fascinated, and challenged about them. When you ask a debilitated English learner, they will say, I want to learn English. How can somebody learn English? What is English to them? They have no idea, no map of English. So first we have to bring them into smaller chunks, which is manageable. They have to start somewhere, learn a bit of English somewhere, and get the taste of it. Then they'll be able to do more on their own. Feedback as a component of strategy. An efficient learning strategy will also have a good feedback system to help make corrections. Depending on the task, it might contain an auditory external for a music student, visual constructed for the student painter, or visual external, or kinesthetic, physical, or auditory external for an athlete shooting free throws, seeing basket over the ball, feel of body and arm moving in the groove, sound of ball swishing through the net. Like all successful strategies, effective learning is seen to take place through the test, operate, test, exit feedback loop, which is based on computer modeling. Our debilitated learners never do that. We have not taught them how to do it, how to learn a little bit and find out whether they have learned it, and then go on, move on to the next one. They learn everything together. A child's strategy to get motivated. Here I am giving more examples so that you understand this concept. We have said we experience life, and for experience we have got strategies, and that strategy is a syntax of sensory experiences. So we are looking at sensory experiences, the syntax, the strategy, how it works. Now a child, how it gets motivated. An example, it's not the only way. There will be millions and each child will have a different strategy. That's why I used to say approaches to English learning. Each student has a different approach. We have got only about 5, 6 or 7 approaches, and we take them as the Bible and teach them this the way. Each student will find out his own approach. Here is an instance of how a child gets motivated to study. When the teacher states in the class, I am going to teach you a very important topic today. This is auditory external. The sound is come from the teacher outside. The child recollects the loving face of the mother. Visual recollection. Mother's face comes to the child and remembers her mother's encouraging words to study well. Only if you study well, you can become successful like your father, whoever it is. Some example. That is auditory recollection. She visualizes her successful father and says to herself, I should study well. That is auditory internal dialogue. And imagine herself to be as successful as her father. Visual constructed. She's imagining that. He has already constructed herself as a successful person. This motivates the child to decide to study well. So the strategy of the child is, as you see on the screen. So it's as simple as that. So all these things happen in the child's mind. In every student's mind, they happen in different ways. Unless we find that out, we need not exactly find out. We have to make them aware of what is happening, and they have to take the responsibility and work on it. A child's experience of getting motivated. To get motivated to study well, that child has an integrated experience of hearing the teacher, internally seeing the loving face of the mother, recollecting her mother's voice of encouragement, visualizing a successful father in the mind, having an internal dialogue, visualizing herself in her mind as a successful person. This is the syntax for this child. So successful motivation happens for this child this way. Now, one university student, when I was discussing, a student was telling me how it works for him. It was something extraordinary, so I would like to share it with you. This student would observe the time in his watch. So that is visual external. If it is 7 p.m., he would express to himself, it is time to study. That is auditory internal dialogue. He would imagine that the bright students in the class are just about to overtake him as in a running race. Visual internal. He would talk to himself. They were almost approaching. Auditory internal dialogue. And he would have the experience of running faster. That is kinesthetic internal. This was enough for him to get motivated to study. His syntax is as we see. So this is some extraordinary. I couldn't believe it, as somebody would take his studies as a running race where he has to compete with so many people and where he has to succeed. Unless we know it, we need not know it exactly. Unless we facilitate that student to know it and move ahead, this wouldn't happen. Now we have another strategy for motivation. A child that likes a teacher has this strategy for learning English. The child visualizes the teaching beginning to teach something. When the teacher begins to teach something, visual constructor. The child experiences the love of the teacher, kinesthetic internal, and recalls the words of the teacher praising her to her mother. Sometimes, when mothers come, most of the teachers would complain, but some teachers give a positive note so that the child could hear it. That's what. The child sees the happiness on the face of her mother and feels that it should learn well, motivating to study. The child's strategy is, as you see on the screen. And strategies of learners with Delts, our heroes now. Even for getting negative results, students have strategies, namely strategies to feel sad, disappointed, helpless, miserable, and so on. Even here, strategies work. Learners suffer from Delts only because of the failure to develop effective strategies to learn English. However, even a student holding a negative frame, I can't learn English, can be helped by reframing what he considers failure as feedback. So what he thinks, I can't learn English, that's a feedback. I can't learn English yet. If you add that yet, that means there is a hope for the future. By leading the student to think, maybe I can learn English in the future, we can show the path of success to the student. It's a little reframing, very slight, but it works, miracles. The teacher can facilitate the absorption of the ingredients of the successful formula and lead the student onto the course of success. Facilitating strategy formation for learning English. Strategy formation for learning takes place in the unconscious mind. It is not possible to draw out a strategy and force the learners of English to follow it. A strategy to be effective should be in consonance with the purpose, identity, beliefs, values, capabilities, behavior, and environment of the learner, and it has to happen naturally to be effective. NLP neurological alignment emphasizes this alignment for the successful attainments. The following practices gathered from the successful learners of English can form the ingredients of the syntax of successful strategies of English. Am I overshooting the time? The successful practices identified by modeling. Good learners of English take the responsibility to learn English, being empowered by enabling beliefs, values, motivation, and confidence. After identifying their most resourceful state that makes learning easy and enjoyable, they anchor it and move into it every time they learn English. They know how to reframe their map of English language and chunk it down so that it is easier for them to learn. They invariably use the test, operate, test, exit technique to make sure that they learn what they learn thoroughly. Above all, they use positive inner dialogues to identify and rectify the linguistic errors incorporated in their unconscious competence. Finally, they frame the right strategies to learn English, discarding the failed or ineffective strategies. In brief, those who follow these procedures know how to learn English. Experience of students with Delts. He thinks of learning English and he imagines himself struggling with English. He articulates to himself that it is difficult for him to learn English. Immediately he is reminded of his girlfriend. This is a positive experience that happened in my experience when I was experimenting. A student was reminded of his girlfriend who speaks English well and assures himself, I must also learn to speak English well. If my girlfriend can speak English very well, I can also learn to speak English very well. He imagines himself conversing well with his girlfriend, and thus he's fully motivated to learn to speak English. So the right strategies would be taking the responsibility to learn English, getting empowered by motivation, confidence, empowering beliefs and values, identifying the most resourceful state and making learning easy and enjoyable, anchoring the most resourceful state and moving into it every time they learn English, reframing, developing a map of English language that is easier to tackle, chunking down English and making it feasible to learn, using the test, operate, test, exit technique to learn English, having positive inner dialogues to learn English. Is that okay? Language is controlled by the unconscious mind. We do not speak language. Language speaks itself. We do not learn language. Language learns itself. So, this only shows that learning English is an unconscious process. We talk about, I will quickly go through the neurology of learning so that we have an idea about what it is. Learning occurs through the modification of the brain's neural connections. Have you ever asked, why didn't my students learn that important concept we went over and over and over and over in class? Answer is, good teachers change the human brain every day. Change has to take place in the hardware. Our brain is hardware, and it is, if for the debilitated English learner, it is hardware in the negative way, we have to develop new pathways physically. That is, from gross anatomy to microscopic anatomy and physiology, learning and memory require physical changes in the neurons of the brain electrical rewiring has to happen. When we learn something new, two amazing things happen. We actually grow more and bigger dendrites on our neurons. We use these new dendrites to create new connections with other neurons. So the 5 rules of the brain is: dendrites grow only from what is already there. Dendrites grow for what is practiced. Dendrites grow from stimulating experiences. Emotions affect learning. Use it or lose it. So this is the way learning has to take place, so that dendrites grow and that new pathways are made on the brain, and there is some physical change taking place in there. And we have also heard about different chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphin. All these things have to come. They help. How to make them happen? I talked about most resourceful state. So natural learning happens when the learner is in good condition, mentally, physically, emotionally. Head, brain is alert and active. Hands, body is calm and balanced. Heart, feelings are positive. So only when somebody is in this mood, he is ready to learn. So I give an example from here. It's a machine language for computer. That is on and off, binaries. So we have to write so much to the machine, to the chip, so that it means Z is X plus Y. So much has to be written. So in the beginning, they were trying this. Then they were getting shortcuts. For instance, hardware, our brain is here. There is some machine like that is binaries. What is the binary for our mind? We talked about the syntax of sensory experiences. Our brain understands sensory experiences, and by the syntax, it knows what it is. It experiences whether it is positive or negative or what to do. Always the machine doesn't understand, the brain doesn't understand. So for that, people started with assembly language and now high-level language. Assembly languages also had codes which were difficult to learn. In high-level languages, they are more like our normal languages. There are phrases that is akin to our languages. So we are able to communicate with the hardware, which understands only the binary thing, with the help of some language. Likewise, with the help of NLP, we can talk to the brain so that neural pathways are created and our debilitated learners are able to learn. Another example is, for example, to write a small A in ASCII. ASCII is American Standard Code for Informational Interchange. They have to write 097. When they write that...
So excuse me, sir. I mean, we are running short of time, I believe. So.
I know. That's why I asked in between whether we can wind up. So I have given enough. There is much more, but it's enough for today. We have talked about the experience of the debilitated English learner and how it works, how the experience is formed. We have talked about strategies and how strategies can be formed. The teachers can help the debilitated learner. And here we'll wind up and we can meet later if there is any chance. All the best.
Thank you, Dr. John, for this intellectual exposure on debilitated learners. Your talk was truly inspiring and it was so informational for all of us. Being the heroes today for debilitated learners, you shed a lot of light on various aspects on this topic. One of the most interesting stories was our story about the polar bear from the Denver Zoo, as well as the baby elephant syndrome. You also shed quite an interesting light on the debilitated English learner syndrome, as well as you also gave us varied symptoms of all of the debilitated English learners, where they find it very difficult to speak the language and how they lack various study skills. You also gave us a detailed explanation about the NLP communication model, the spelling strategy as well, and how, the positive feelings can be as a component of strategy. So on the whole, you also spoke about the right strategies that needed to be followed, on how the learners need to take responsibility to learn English, use the TOT technique, and, have a positive right strategy in order to learn the language in a much better way. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now we shall open the floor to our participants for our question and answer session. We'll be reading quite a few questions, as we're a bit crunched on time. Sir, our first question is from Dr. Sunita Vijay Kumar. She's asked you, do you agree to multiple intelligences, and do you agree that they play a role in language learning? Because psychologists say we may not attribute learning only to a certain style. Sir, can you please answer this?
Multiple intelligence is an offshoot of NLP only, so we accept that.
Okay. Our next question is from Lakshmi. Is the learning problem noticed only in English language skills?
Learning problem, you see, when you take learning as a second language, there is problem. If you take our context, in India, English not at all the second language. I would say it's an additional language. It's an add-on. Because in the kindergarten, they learn English. Only where they learn to write their mother tongue also. So it is already part of it. Only when that articulators have developed the maximum for children, they are learning English. So it has to go along. The only problem is mostly in the kindergarten and in the primary schools, they are taught by teachers who do not know how to speak English. So instead of speaking to them English, they teach them English. They teach A for apple, B for biscuit. That's not language. If they talk to them as the mother would talk to them in their vernacular, how are you? What did you eat? This kind of thing goes on regularly. They will pick up the language without any problem. So that's the only reason. Otherwise, there is no problem at all. Teaching English, we have taught English. We are not facilitated the children to acquire English, because by the time they come to school, they have developed strategies for learning their own language. Because learning language happens, I told you, in a very half-assed way. There is no regular way of teaching at all. It picks up languages from everywhere. Mother talks, everybody talks, From there, it brings some meaningful expressions and slowly able to talk grammatically correct sentences. That's a capability. We underestimate the child. The child is capable of learning any number of languages at that point of time. We have seen many children in the slums learning many languages at the same time, because there are in the slum people speaking different languages. Even in some apartments, if there are friends speaking different tongues, the child picks up very easily. So we have to facilitate that. Instead of teaching spoken language separately, we have to help. I would say the best teacher should handle the students in the kindergarten and the primary school.
Thank you, Dr. John A. Joseph. Thank you so much. We shall end our question and answer session here due to the time constraints. Thank you, sir, for making this webinar a very meaningful and interesting presentation. I'd also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the members of ELTAI, the board, the organizing committee, the chapter head of Chennai Central, the technical support, and finally our participants for today. Thank you so much. You've been fantastic listeners. I now hand over the session to our host. Thank you.
Dear participants, we have a set of announcements for you. 15th International and 51st Annual Conference of ELTAI, a 4-day virtual conference on the topic ELTAI in India, New Needs, New Demands, New Trends will be held on 2 weekends, 20-21 November and 27 and 28 November. The registration for the participants is still going on, and the last day to register will be the 20th of November 2021. And our next webinar will be from the month of December. Thank you for attending the webinar, and you will be receiving your feedback form in your registered mail. Kindly submit the feedback form to receive your certificates, and we wish you all a good day. Thank you.